Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Conroy with the National Sports Media Association. Today, I'm here talking with 2022 South Carolina Sportswriter of the Year, Jon Blau. Jon, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Ben?
I'm good. Thank you for taking the time. So for my first question, I wanted to just go back to the beginning a little bit. I wanted to see if you could tell me how you got your first job in sports media, how you got started, and then take me along your career path to where you are now in Charleston.
Yeah, so I graduated from Penn State in 2008. I actually, that's during the recession, so weren't a lot of jobs. I actually ended up working at a weekly called the Queens Chronicle, part-time, $17,000 a year, and then ended up going to NFL Films. I'm actually from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which is where NFL Films is based. And I worked 3 seasons there as a production assistant. So it actually took me some time to get into newspapers full time. It was 2012 was my first full time job in newspapers, and it was actually as a news writer. And so I covered cops, I covered city government, covered higher ed, covered investigations until I transitioned into high school sports reporting in 2014. And then in 2019, I got promoted to the Indiana University athletics beat. And so then it was a couple years there, and then I got this job here in Charleston for the Post and Courier covering Clemson athletics.
Well, it sounds like a very storied career to this point. So congratulations on that. So you've just mentioned a bunch of really unique and interesting stops, during your career. So what are some of the most impactful moments that you can remember covering, or some impactful sports stories you've gotten to tell over the years?
Yeah, obviously being a news reporter, I didn't know what the heck I was doing at first. Then you're covering cops and I think like city corruption. There was actually a case I covered where the city, somebody in the city public works department embezzled about $1 million. I mean, covering those types of serious subjects, things about you know homes for people with intellectual disabilities where they were living, and some serious cases of abuse and things like that. And so you're covering some very serious things, and you learn how to be a real, I guess, reporter in a way. I mean, using public information and talking to officials and things like that about very serious things, and you transition back into being a sports reporter. And I think just you learn, I guess, between the two kind of genres, that the thing that links them all is you're reporting about people. And so I think the kind of stories I like to tell are just about who this person is more than just what happened on the field and things like that. So I mean, I think about high schools. One of my favorite stories early on was there was a kid named Tate Balcom who was the son of the daughter of this famous IU football coach, Terry Hepner, who died of brain cancer. And then Tate's mother died tragically in a car accident. And so he had lost two very important people in his life at a very young age, but he was a very mature kid, came out great. Just kind of how he experienced those things, how he grew from those things. Really delving into a subject with a person, a young person in that case, and how they cope with that. I mean, that was a story that I'll probably always remember. And yeah, just like other really weird, silly ones, I guess. Like Ernie Thompson was a running back at Indiana University. He never graduated from college. I wrote about he went back to school at like 50 years old, and talking to him about why he went back to school, what it's like being a student again, things like that. I guess just bring it forward, I guess, to Clemson. I mean, my favorite one thus far here has been Trenton Simpson, the star linebacker for Clemson. His dad actually was an Army Ranger. And so he spent most of his, teenage years. His dad was, over in other countries in the military, and just kind of what the relationship was like between a military son and a military father, and the distance and how they kind of closed that gap over time in the last year. And I think one of the cool scenes that I got was that one of the Army Rangers, basically when Trent was like a baby and obviously didn't know this kid was going to turn out to be like a 5-star linebacker, did kind of like the Simba ceremony from Lion King and held up Trenton Simpson, this future NFL linebacker, and said, "This is the son of Bravo Company. He is our son. He's one of us." And they're obviously very proud of the player and athlete he's turned out to be. So yeah, just those types of stories about people, emotional subjects, how they handle things in life, and more about who they are as people than just what they're doing on the field.
Yeah, that sound like some really special stories there. So to this point, you've had a lengthy career in the industry and a couple different stops. What advice would you have for a young person, maybe a college student who's looking to crack into the world of sports media, maybe find that first job? What sort of tips would you have for them to get started and then stay successful in the field?
Yeah, I guess going back to my career path is just get your foot in the door. And I mean, it's just whether that's covering sports, whether that's covering news, be open to being just a reporter and seeing where you land. And if you work really hard, if you put in hours, you'll be successful at either thing. I mean, I don't think this is a profession that um, necessarily there's any secret recipe. It's literally how many hours do you put into interviewing people, how many hours do you put into writing a story. um, I mean, reading, I think people talk about that a lot, reading other people to see what they do and how they do it, to kind of read that, kind of work that into your own writing. And also going back and reading your own stuff and saying, okay, what could I have done better in this story, and try it again. And that's kind of the advice is just get your foot in the door, work really hard. And then once you kind of get to a certain level, you'll have written enough that you'll realize where your weaknesses are, what you can improve, and you just always have the next day. And that's the really cool thing about journalism is you can have a day where you feel like you wrote a really whatever story, but then the next day it might come to you. You might have an even better story, and your success rate of how many stories are just kind of as opposed to really good might go up after a while. But it's just time and it's effort, and just putting those in is really the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely good advice there. So I wanted to ask about your current position, covering Clemson athletics in Charleston. What's your favorite part about being on the Clemson beat and living in Charleston? I visited there. It's a great town.
Yeah, actually, I'm not in Charleston. I have to clarify that. I actually live in Greenville because Charleston is where the paper is. Clemson's on the other side of the state. So that's the interesting thing about my job. So I actually live in Greenville, which is kind of farther, to the west, almost basically in Georgia, which is where Clemson is. But yeah, it's an interesting beat. Obviously, Dabo Sweeney's a character. I mean, everybody knows about him and Clemson football, and so it's just it's interesting being behind the scenes of that program. They obviously had a lot of success over the years. Went to 6 straight college football playoffs. Obviously, right when I got here, they stopped going to the playoffs, and so it's been interesting to cover a little bit of the tumult of people being a little like not quite as happy as they were before. How you kind of try to straddle huge expectations as opposed to being realistic about programs aren't going to win national championships every year. They aren't going to go to the playoffs every year, and how they've dealt with that. That's been really interesting to be behind the scenes of that. And obviously, just made a staff change, new offensive coordinator, lots of, interesting news always happening, things always evolving. It's a very interesting beat. And there's a lot of stories to be told again, like that Trent Simpson story. I enjoyed that one. There's a lot of opportunity to really talk to these guys one-on-one. I've enjoyed that. And and obviously just a program with a big brand, big name. People are always interested in what's going on with Clemson. So it's been a pretty cool experience thus far.
Yeah, I'm a Wake Forest student, so we almost got you guys this year. It was a fun.
As a
Uh,
shootout, that was an interesting game. Good for sure.
yeah, that was a fun one. So my next question, I wanted to ask a little bit about this award. So, as someone who's dedicated so much of your career to being in this industry, what does it mean to have your work recognized with a Sports Writer of the Year award, especially one that's from your peers?
Yeah, I mean that is kind of cool. I think I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, and I end up downplaying things like this and say it's very subjective, and I end up not taking it in as much as I should. But yeah, no, like when you put it that way, and probably thinking about it, yeah, that is kind of cool that people that I work with, people that know me, have seen my work, think that I'm pretty good, and want to give me an award. That is very meaningful and very nice. I appreciate that. Um, And yeah, I guess again I'm bad at this part. So, but yeah, it's it is kind of cool. I would say that for sure.
Well, it's definitely well deserved. For my last question, you mentioned a little bit, there's a lot going on at Clemson right now. New offensive coordinator, obviously, in the football program. The basketball team's doing very well. Um, what are you sort of most excited to continue to cover throughout 2023?
Yeah, again, going back to the football program, new offensive coordinator, like you said, the air raid offense, very exciting. Obviously, they had a lot of success at TCU. Garrett Riley did. A quarterback coming up, Kate Klubnik, a sophomore who's very talented. Again, trying to get back to that mountaintop of college football. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. They brought a bunch of players back on the defensive side, and yeah, I probably shouldn't skip the whole basketball thing. I mean, obviously, Clemson's atop the ACC, which I don't think anybody predicted. That's been kind of fun to watch that group because it's kind of a rare group in college basketball nowadays. Very experienced, have a lot of players who've been around for a while. A team that's kind of been underestimated. I guess everybody kind of likes an underdog story. I mean, they're kind of that underdog story there. So that would be cool to see how that finishes up. And this is kind of an under the radar thing, but Clemson baseball. Baseball is a very big deal here. Had a couple of down years. Have a new head coach. They brought in Eric Bakich from Michigan, who had a lot of success up there in a northern program. It'll be interesting to see how he does down in the South with a program that's has some history in baseball. So that will be fun as well. But yeah, there's always something going on. It'll be interesting to see kind of how Clemson football, like I said, evolves and moves forward, and how all that goes will be very interesting for sure.
Absolutely. We can't wait to see what you do next. Jon, thank you for taking the time today. And again, congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Ben.